Hello friends, welcome back. So this is finally the day. Daily art adventure number 200. Woohoo! Let me tell you what I'm doing today. I am doing my second take on C.F. Payne. He's a famous illustrator. I knew him as Chris Payne in the Dallas Society of Illustrators about 35 years ago. And let me show you some of his work real quickly. You've seen his work, whether you know it or not, on the front of Time magazine, on the back of Reader's Digest for many years. He did every Reader's Digest for a number of years, and he's done all kinds of other real famous stuff. Very distinctive style, very winsome style, in my opinion. That's why I'm forcing myself to learn his technique. And I already explained, I did one of these last week. I did a portrait of Tony Bennett, gave myself about a B+ when all was said and done. So I'm trying to get an A today. And I've decided to do a portrait of myself. Let me show you real quickly what I've done. First of all, I have a photograph that somebody took of me a year or two ago. And for the last 4 or 5 days, 3 days, I've been doing really bad caricatures of myself. There's my, sitting watching TV with the grandkids kind of stuff. There's my first terrible one. There's my second terrible one. There's my third, a little bit closer. And there's my fourth. And let me tell you what I did with this. So this is the one basically I used, but not quite. I tell you this because I give you permission to do the same thing. I took a picture of this and emailed it to my computer, which is right over my shoulder here. And I opened up this image in Photoshop. And then, I think I can show you this here on a light table. I want to impress on all of you wannabe portrait painter artist people the advantage, the huge advantage of looking at any portrait you do as a mirror image. So this is the way I'd looked at it. I actually did a lot of this while I was riding in the car with my wife driving. And then I turned it over and I went, eek! That's the eek, is the eek of discovery. The eek of, oh my goodness, there's a whole bunch of mistakes here that I didn't see. So in this case, instead of fixing it on paper, like I often do, in this case, let me turn off that bad light now. In this case, I actually put it in Photoshop. And in Photoshop, I turned it over and went, eek. Got it? And then in Photoshop, I stretched and pushed and pulled and moved my mouth, moved one eye, adjusted my forehead, moved an ear, moved a chin, and so on and so on and so forth. And I ended up with this image, which I have now messed up and desecrated. So I'm done with these now. And this is, I enlarged it, as you can see, and I made poor man's carbon paper, or quick carbon paper. I took a vine charcoal, rubbed it all over with vine charcoal, then took a tissue and rubbed that. Are you with me? Throw that tissue out now. And then I taped it down on top of this piece of Crescent cold press illustration board. Crescent illustration board. Traditional. Been using it for 40 years. Not this piece. Okay, never mind. Taped it down, and then I think this is important. I took a red ballpoint pen. Why red? Because if you use black or even dark blue on black, it's hard to tell where you've been. So if you use red, it's real easy to see where you've been. So I am now finished with that. I can throw that out. And now I misplaced a photograph of myself. It's around here somewhere. And there we go. So I got a picture of myself here. And now I start the real drawing. And since we last spoke, by the way, I went out and bought some new Prismacolor very thin. I had fat Prismacolors the last time I did this, but did not have the skinny ones, and I really do want the skinny ones. So now this is finally starting parts of the painting or the illustration that in fact are going to show up in the final version. I should have brought last week's Chris Payne attempt upstairs with me, but I didn't. I left it down there again. It was a picture of Tony Bennett, and again I gave myself about a B+. That might have been a little bit generous. I don't think so. Could have been a B. Wasn't any better than that, I don't think. And one of the things, so I learned many things, which I will indicate to you as I go through today's attempt number 2 to do a C.F. Payne portrait. And almost all of his portraits, by the way, almost all of them are in fact caricatures. So that's why I decided to do a caricature of myself. Now, just a comment about doing a caricature, at least for me, I find it very difficult to do a caricature of myself. You really have to have an extraordinary degree of objectivity to do a portrait of yourself because, not a portrait, I can do a portrait of myself. All I have to do is copy exactly what I look like. I've done many of those. Go to my website, you can see my self-portraits there. But when you're doing a caricature of anybody, you are asking yourself, what are the extremities? What are the outliers on this person's face? What is it about this face that is unusual? And frankly, I think it's kind of hard to answer that question about yourself because for most of us, our own face is so familiar, there's nothing unusual about it. So, I could have made this more real. I found myself with my caricatures, each one got more and more and more realistic, simply because I found that it looked more like me if I made it look more like me. Anyway, I'm sure that's a lousy excuse because many artists over the years have done, including Chris Payne, have done caricatures of themselves. And so I really don't have a good excuse. But I did find that it was quite the challenge to do a caricature of myself. I've done it before, but it's been a very long time. And oh my goodness, if you want to find out how old you really are, I'm talking to my fellow, sexagenarians and so forth. That means I'm over 60, by the way. If you want to really find out how old you really are, do a caricature of yourself, because the whole point is not to make yourself look better or diminish any of these lines, but in fact to exaggerate them slightly. So there's no question in my mind now how old I really look. All my illusions of a youthful 63 have been dashed on the hard wax of reality. Anyway, I think this is going to look like me, even albeit an exaggerated version of me. And again, the technique is Chris Payne. Let me explain again. I said all this last week, but let me repeat some of it because I know many of you didn't see it. This is my note. These are my notes of 2 videos that Chris Payne has on YouTube that I can find. Only 2. And one of them, he does a pretty good job of describing what he's doing. It's about 10 or 15 years old. But he doesn't describe every single step. And then the other video is even shorter than that. So this is me doing my best to try to figure out what he's doing. I should say, one of the reasons also I feel free, if that's the word. Chris, if you ever see this, I hope you're okay with this, man. You never knew me, but I knew you because of course you were a big shot at Dallas Society of Illustrators in 1987 when I showed up. And then you moved away really quickly, so I didn't get to know you very well. But anyway, part of the reason I'm doing this is Chris, his technique, as far as I can tell, is completely idiosyncratic. I believe he's the only person I know that uses his technique. And if I may, his technique is brilliant. And deserves, in my opinion, to be recorded for posterity. So since, forgive me, he hasn't done a good job of recording his technique for posterity, I see it at least a little bit as somebody's job to record it for him. So maybe that's what I'm doing. And yes, if Chris ever does correct me, that would be wonderful. If he comes and says, "You idiot, I don't do this or that, I do this and that," that would be wonderful. So Chris, if you ever see this and you feel like correcting my mistakes, please do so. Again, so let me give you his 8 steps here. Let me tell you what I'm doing, and I'll do all of these on the internet, either here on YouTube or my Facebook page, and my handle is, my name is the same on both Facebook and YouTube. It's all one word, Dan Nelson Art. So if you want to watch me do part 2 of this, you'll need to go over to Facebook, Dan Nelson Art, because that's where I'll be in just a few minutes. Okay, so let me tell you though what the 5 steps are. Number 1, colored pencil, which you see me doing here with a little bit of shading. Number 2, he does a thin layer of flesh colored acrylic over the whole face. Number 3, he does watercolor on top of that, on top of the facial flesh tones, and then lifts out light areas. Number 3, he sprays that. Number 4, he does acrylics. I don't mean that at all. He does oils. These 2 colors, permanent green light and dioxazine purple or violet, mixed together to get a neutral gray. He does, again, gray over the whole thing, lets it dry for an hour or overnight, and then, listen to this, lifts out that with a kneaded eraser. That is crazy. And then he sprays that with a very rough fixative. I'm going to be using lacquer mat. He uses something slightly different, and I'd like to use it, but I don't have that. But I do have a similar product, I believe. And then he finishes it in acrylic and colored pencil. So there you go. That, real quick, is the 7 or 8 steps that C.F. Payne uses to achieve his brilliant renderings. Fascinating texture, beautifully modeled images, and again, they're beautifully modeled largely because he uses not 1 but 2 subtractive techniques. And as I said last week at some length, I said that the shortest route from start to finish, if you want a modeled, I'm saying modeled, like M-O-D-L-E-D, modeled, that means rounded image. The fastest way to achieve that is by using a lift-out technique, or a reverse negative painting technique. And one of the most famous examples of that in the world is the Mona Lisa. The Italian word for this lift-out, smoky approach to painting, in fact, the word is the Italian word for smoke, which is sfumato. So this is a modern version of sfumato painting. That's what that is. This is not chiaroscuro, which is the opposite. Caravaggio. I'm saying all these words, aren't I? Chiaroscuro is a technique. Caravaggio is the number 1 exhibitor of that technique. This is a sfumato technique, and it's achieved largely by lifting out. So in this technique, I'm going to be lifting out twice. The first time I'll be lifting out watercolor. The second time we will be lifting out oil paint. And then after that, it's all positive painting. And I hope I haven't bored you to tears with too much talking, but while I'm at it, I will tell you also that in the final stages, Chris follows the classic rule of color, if I may. He gets dark using transparent layers of acrylic, and he gets light primarily with light colored pencil. So that's probably, I did a lot more here than I thought you'd get to see me doing, so I hope that's satisfactory to you. After I finish this outline, I'm going to go over to Facebook for one thing. My episode B, 200B, will be over on Facebook, and I'll be doing some shading with these pencils. Oh, and by the way, what people ask me, why are you wearing the glove? I'm always amazed when people can't figure that out. Sorry, that sounds a little diminutive, doesn't it? It is to protect the paper. It is not to protect my hand. I'm sorry. There is nothing dangerous on this piece of illustration board. Trust me, there's nothing dangerous there. I'm not wearing this glove to protect my hand. I say that because so many people guess that on my videos. That is hilarious. No, it's to protect the paper so that I don't get oils on the illustration board that then will turn yellow in a matter of 10 years, which you young people don't realize is like Boom, that quickly in the world of art. You will be my age before you can say Jackrabbit something something. Before you can say C.F. Payne 3 times, you'll be 60 something and go, where did all the time go? Okay, I've proceeded to sound like an old person now. For sure, a real old person. Listen to me, Sonny. I'll tell you all about it. Okay, that's enough. That's too much, isn't it? That's enough. You can tell I've gone demented on you. So let me stop there, and I'll be back in a little while on Facebook. Thanks so much for watching.